You ever wonder if a single moment can destroy everything? Not a natural disaster or some massive economic crash, but just one person's arrogance meeting the wrong target at exactly the wrong time. Well, I'm about to tell you how a 28-year-old MBA with daddy issues managed to turn her family's $500 million manufacturing empire into scrap metal, all because she decided to slap the one guy who kept their entire operation running. My name's Harold Brennan, Hal to most folks, and I'm 48 years old, 8 years Navy, then 20 years climbing the ranks in industrial automation. Never thought I'd be the guy to watch a family dynasty collapse, but sometimes life has other plans. Let me back up a bit, so you understand how I ended up in this mess. After my discharge from the Navy in 2004, I used my GI Bill to get an engineering degree at Case Western, specialized in industrial automation and control systems. See, when you've spent 8 years maintaining reactor systems on nuclear submarines, civilian manufacturing equipment seems pretty straightforward by comparison. The Navy teaches you things civilian engineers never learn: how to build systems that absolutely cannot fail, because failure means people die. How to create redundancies within redundancies. Security protocols that protect against every conceivable threat, including the human ones. Most importantly, how to think like someone trying to break your system, so you can stop them before they try. I started with Morrison Industrial Holdings in 2008, right after the financial crash, when nobody was hiring engineers. Robert Morrison took a chance on a veteran with submarine experience and a fresh degree. Smart move on his part. I understood both the mechanical side and the electronic side. Plus, I had security clearance for the defense contracts Morrison was chasing. Morrison wasn't some Silicon Valley startup. This was old-school American manufacturing. Automotive parts precision machining, the kind of work that built the middle class in places like Akron. Robert Morrison had started the company in 1984 with a $50,000 loan and a rented warehouse. By the time I got there, they were doing $200 million in annual revenue, employing 1,800 people across Ohio and Michigan. The family had been good to me. Robert treated his people right, profit sharing, health benefits that actually covered things, Christmas bonuses when we had good years. His son David came up through the ranks, worked summers on the factory floor during college, understood the business from the ground up, different generation but solid values. Then Catherine graduated from Wharton in 2023. Catherine Morrison was Robert's youngest, born when he was 44 and already established. While David was learning the family business, Catherine was at private schools, then Stanford for undergrad, then Wharton for her MBA. Nothing wrong with education, hell, I respect knowledge. But there's a difference between learning about business and understanding how things actually work. She started consulting for the family company 6 months ago. Fresh MBA full of theories about optimization and strategic realignment. Her first recommendation was cutting the maintenance budget by 30% because preventive maintenance represents inefficient capital allocation. That's when I knew we had a problem. See, I'd spent 20 years building Morrison's automation systems from the ground up. Started with basic programmable logic controllers, gradually integrated everything into a comprehensive industrial IoT network. Quality control systems that could detect defects at the microscopic level. Supply chain integration that automatically adjusted production schedules based on real-time demand data. Predictive maintenance algorithms that caught equipment problems before they caused downtime. By 2025, Morrison Industrial was running some of the most sophisticated manufacturing automation in the Midwest. We could fulfill custom orders in half the time of our competitors, with defect rates below 0.1%. That's what took the company from $200 million to $500 million in revenue over 15 years. But here's the thing about sophisticated systems: they require sophisticated maintenance. You can't just cut the budget and hope everything keeps working. I tried explaining this to Catherine during a board meeting in March. Miss Morrison, I said, keeping my voice respectful, these systems require continuous calibration and security updates. Reducing maintenance funding will compromise operational integrity. She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Mr. Brennan, according to industry benchmarks, our maintenance costs are 40% above optimal. That represents pure waste. Those benchmarks don't account for our system complexity. We're not running standard equipment here. I have an MBA from Wharton. I think I understand operational efficiency. David tried to mediate. Catherine, Hal built these systems. Maybe we should, David. Sentiment isn't strategy. Business schools don't teach you to defer to technicians. That word again, Technician, like 20 years of engineering expertise, was just turning wrenches. But I bit my tongue, because family businesses have their own politics. Robert was proud of his daughter's education, and David was trying to keep peace between family and operations. I figured we'd work it out eventually. Then came the Morrison Family Foundation's annual dinner. The foundation was Robert's pride and joy, minus 20 years of giving back to the community, scholarships for local kids, support for veteran programs. Every year they'd host this big dinner, invite local dignitaries, hand out awards, make speeches about Morrison Industrial's commitment to Ohio manufacturing. This year, the foundation board decided to give me some kind of technology innovation in manufacturing award. Recognition for modernizing their production systems, contributing to the company's growth, that sort of thing. Nice gesture, I thought. Show up, shake some hands, maybe help with recruiting. Young engineers like seeing established companies that invest in technology. The dinner was at the Hilton downtown, fancy ballroom, maybe 300 people. Local mayor, city council members, other business owners, Morrison employees and their families. Black tie affair. I borrowed a suit from my brother-in-law because the Navy taught me how to maintain dress uniforms, not civilian formal wear. Morrison family table was right up front, naturally. Robert Morrison himself, still sharp at 72, built like he could still work a factory floor if needed. David beside him, looking like he'd rather be reviewing production schedules than making small talk with politicians. And Catherine, fresh from whatever networking event she'd been attending that week, designer dress that probably cost more than most Morrison workers made in a month. I was sitting at the head table, checking my tactical watch out of habit. Old Navy routine, you always know what time it is, because timing matters when systems are involved. The production lines back at the plant were running overnight shifts, automated systems I'd personally configured, and I wanted to check the monitoring dashboards after dinner. That's when Catherine noticed me. "Excuse me," she said loud enough for half the table to hear. "I'm sorry, but why exactly is there hired help sitting at the family table?" The conversation around us stopped like someone had cut the power. David looked up from his conversation with the mayor, his face already showing that here we go again expression. Robert was talking with some potential investors and hadn't heard yet, but I could see the ripple effect starting. David tried to intervene immediately. "Catherine, that's Harold Brennan. He's receiving an award tonight for his contributions to our manufacturing systems." "I don't care what participation trophy he's getting," she said, not even looking at me. "This is a family foundation event, not employee appreciation night." Now, I've been in situations where keeping my mouth shut was the difference between life and death. Navy nuclear program teaches you when to speak and when to listen. You learn to read situations, understand chain of command, respect hierarchy. But there's a line between respecting authority and accepting disrespect, and Catherine had just crossed it. "Ma'am," I said, setting down my water glass and looking directly at her with respect, "I'm here representing the technology infrastructure that maintains your family's operational capacity." Wrong answer. Apparently, Catherine's face went from annoyed to furious in about 2 seconds. "Don't you dare lecture me about my family's business. You're nothing but a glorified technician who doesn't understand his place in this organization." That word again, technician. Like 20 years of engineering expertise, like submarine nuclear training, like building systems that generated hundreds of millions in revenue. All of that was just technician work to someone with an MBA and no operational experience. "Catherine," David said, his voice getting that warning tone, "Hal is our chief technology officer. He's been with the company for, I don't care what inflated title Dad gave him." She cut him off. "Employees belong at employee tables, not at the family table. Period." The mayor was pretending to check his phone. The city council members were suddenly very interested in their dinner plates. Everyone at the table could feel this going sideways, but nobody wanted to get between a family argument. I adjusted my sleeve cuffs, old habit from dress uniform inspections, and checked my watch. 9:47 p.m. System status back at the plant would be running green across all boards. Production lines humming along on overnight shifts. Quality control sensors monitoring every component. Supply chain algorithms adjusting tomorrow's orders based on real-time demand data. All of it running on architectures I'd designed, protocols I'd implemented, security measures I'd built over 2 decades. "Miss Morrison," I said, keeping my voice level, "I built the systems that run your family's business. That technology generates approximately $500 million in annual revenue. and supports 2,500 jobs across Ohio and Michigan. I'd say that qualifies me to sit wherever your father chooses to put me. The slap came out of nowhere. Hard enough to snap my head to the side. Hard enough that my tactical watch scraped against the tablecloth. The sound cut through the whole ballroom like a gunshot. Conversations stopped at tables 50 feet away. The mayor looked up from his phone. The city council members stopped pretending not to watch. I straightened up slowly, adjusted my glasses, checked my watch display. The red mark on my cheek was probably visible to everyone within 20 feet, but my hands were steady. Navy training kicks in during situations like this. You assess, you process, you respond appropriately. Catherine was standing now, trembling with rage. How dare you speak to me like that? Tomorrow morning, you won't have a job in this city, let alone this company. That's when Robert Morrison arrived at our table. He didn't come as a CEO investigating an incident. He didn't come as a leader trying to understand what happened. He came as a father whose daughter was upset, and in family businesses, that's the only perspective that matters. What's going on here? Robert asked, but his arm was already around Catherine's shoulders, his eyes already fixed on me like I was the problem. Dad, Catherine said, her voice shaking with what she probably thought was righteous indignation, this employee just disrespected our entire family in front of the whole community. He thinks his job title gives him the right to lecture me about business. David tried to explain. Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. Catherine was upset about the seating arrangements, and I don't want to hear excuses, Robert said, his voice carrying that corporate authority tone I'd heard him use with difficult customers. Harold, do you have anything to say for yourself? I looked at Robert Morrison, the man who'd given me a chance 17 years ago, who'd promoted me based on results rather than credentials, who'd trusted me to modernize his family's legacy. Now he was looking at me like I was some kind of problem employee who'd gotten out of line. Mr. Morrison, I said, I'm here tonight because your foundation board chose to recognize my contributions to Morrison Industrial's technological advancement. Your daughter objected to my presence at this table and expressed her opinion in terms I found disrespectful. That's not an answer, Robert said. Did you or did you not argue with my daughter about business matters? Sir, I responded to questions about the systems I designed and maintain. Catherine jumped back in. He told me I don't understand our own family business in front of the mayor, in front of everyone. This is exactly the kind of insubordination we talked about. Wait, we talked about when had Robert and Catherine discussed my insubordination. Robert's expression told me everything I needed to know. Those budget meetings, Catherine's recommendations about cutting maintenance funding, my pushback against her optimization theories. It had all been reported back to Robert as employee resistance to family authority. Harold, Robert said, and I could hear the decision already made in his voice. Catherine represents the future of this company. Your attitude tonight has been completely inappropriate for someone in your position. What position is that, sir? You're an employee. A valued employee, but an employee nonetheless. And employees do not argue with family members at family events. I nodded once, understanding the situation completely now. This wasn't about the slap or the seating arrangement, or even Catherine's disrespectful language. This was about family hierarchy versus operational expertise, and in family businesses, hierarchy always wins. I understand, Mr. Morrison. Good. Then you'll apologize to Catherine, and we can move past this. I looked at Catherine Morrison, 28 years old, MBA from Wharton, 6 months of consulting experience, standing there with a satisfied smirk like she'd just won some kind of victory. Then I looked at Robert Morrison, 72 years old, 40 years of building a business from nothing, now choosing family pride over operational reality. No, sir. I don't think I will. The silence that followed was different from before. This wasn't shock surprise. This was the moment everyone realized something fundamental had just shifted. Robert Morrison's face went through several shades of red before settling on something that looked like controlled fury. Excuse me? I said, no, sir. I won't be apologizing to your daughter for responding to her disrespectful behavior. Catherine's mouth actually fell open. I don't think anyone had ever told her no in her entire privileged life. Dad, did you hear what he just said? I heard. Robert's voice was quiet now, which anyone who'd worked for him knew was more dangerous than shouting. Harold, I'm going to give you one more chance to reconsider that answer. I adjusted my sleeve cuffs again, feeling the familiar weight of my tactical watch. 20 years in this business, 17 years with Morrison Industrial. and it was ending over a handshake that never happened and an apology I wouldn't give. Mr. Morrison, I've given this company 2 decades of my career. I've modernized your operations, improved your efficiency, increased your revenue, and helped you compete with companies 10 times your size. I've worked nights, weekends, holidays, whatever it took to keep your systems running. But I won't be treated like hired help by someone who's been here 6 months and thinks an MBA is a substitute for experience. David was shaking his head, trying to signal me to stop talking. The mayor had moved to another table. The city council members were finding urgent reasons to check on the dessert service. "Do you truly think you're that important?" Robert asked, and there was genuine confusion in his voice. This company isn't worth $500 million because of one employee who doesn't know his place. That's when I realized Robert Morrison had no idea what I actually did. He knew I was the computer guy. He knew I worked with the factory equipment. He signed my paychecks and approved my budgets, but he'd never understood that I hadn't just computerized his systems. I'd completely redesigned how Morrison Industrial operated. "Mr. Morrison," I said, "let me explain something. Those production efficiency gains you've been bragging about to investors, the quality control improvements that won you the Ford contract, the supply chain optimization that lets you fulfill orders in half the time of your competitors. That's not magic. That's architecture." Catherine rolled her eyes. "Oh, please, you act like you invented manufacturing. I invented your manufacturing. Every production line in your facilities runs on control systems I designed. Every quality sensor, every inventory tracker, every automated process. I built the logic that makes it work. And more importantly, I built the security protocols that protect it." Robert was starting to look uncomfortable. "Security protocols? Sir, when you're managing $500 million in industrial assets, you don't just plug everything into the internet and hope for the best. These systems require authentication, authorization, monitoring, military-grade security measures to prevent unauthorized access, industrial espionage, system tampering." "What does that have to do with tonight?" Catherine demanded. I looked at her. This 28-year-old MBA who thought business was about spreadsheets and theory and realized she was about to get a very expensive education. "Miss Morrison, those security measures include dead man switches, authentication protocols that require regular confirmation from authorized personnel. If the system detects unauthorized changes or if critical personnel are suddenly removed from the organization, it initiates protective lockdown procedures." David's face went pale. He understood technology better than his father or sister. "How? What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when your family fires the chief technology officer without proper transition procedures, the system interprets that as a potential security breach." Robert stepped closer. "Are you threatening us?" "No, sir. I'm explaining how military-grade security protocols work. They're designed to protect critical infrastructure from exactly this kind of scenario, when someone with authority but without technical understanding makes decisions that could compromise operational integrity." Catherine was getting that superior look again. "This is ridiculous. You're just trying to scare us into keeping you around." I pulled out my phone, opened the Morrison Industrial Monitoring app, and showed her the display. Green indicators across all production lines, all quality control systems, all supply chain interfaces, everything running normally. "Miss Morrison, see those green lights? Every one of those systems requires my biometric authentication every 72 hours to continue normal operations. Miss that window, and the system assumes I've been compromised, removed, or killed. Protective protocols engage automatically. That's insane," she said. "No one builds systems like that. No one builds submarine reactor controls like that either. But that's exactly how they work. Because when you're responsible for systems that people's lives depend on, you don't take chances with security." Robert was staring at the phone display. "How long, sir?" "How long do we have?" I checked my watch. Authentication window closes at midnight Sunday. That's 72 hours from my last login. And then what happens? Gradual system lockdown. First, the advanced automation features shut down, production reverts to manual control, but you lose about 40% efficiency. Then quality control systems engage safety protocols. They'll reject any component that doesn't meet perfect specifications, even marginally acceptable ones. Supply chain integration stops communicating with customer systems. Within 2 weeks, you're running a 1990s factory trying to fulfill 2025 contracts. David was doing math in his head. 40% efficiency loss on $500 million annual revenue, about $200 million in reduced capacity, plus penalty clauses for late deliveries. plus quality control rejections. I put my phone away. But I'm sure your consultants can fix all that with spreadsheet optimization. Catherine looked like I just told her the building was on fire. This is sabotage. No, ma'am. This is standard security protocol for critical infrastructure, the same kind of systems that protect nuclear facilities, defense installations, and other high-value targets from unauthorized access. Robert Morrison stood there for a long moment, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time. 20 years of taking my work for granted, of assuming that the magic just happened automatically, and now he was realizing that the magic had a name and a face and a security clearance. What would it take, he said quietly, to prevent this situation? Before I could answer, Catherine grabbed his arm. Dad, don't let him blackmail us. This is exactly why we can't have employees thinking they're irreplaceable. Robert looked at his daughter, then at his son, then at me. 3 generations of Morrison family business, and I could see him trying to figure out which one was really in charge. Harold, he said, finally, I want you to fix this situation immediately. Override those protocols, extend the deadline, whatever it takes. Then we'll discuss your future with this company. I shook my head. Mr. Morrison, I can't just override military-grade security protocols. They're not designed to be bypassed by personal preference. Then what do you suggest? Proper transition procedures. Documentation, training, gradual handover of administrative privileges. Probably 6 months to fully transfer system control to qualified personnel. Catherine exploded. 6 months. This is ridiculous, Dad. Fire him right now and hire a real IT company to fix whatever damage he's done. And that's when Robert Morrison made the decision that destroyed his family's empire. You know what, Catherine's right, Robert said, his voice getting that corporate executive tone. Harold, you're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and I don't want to see your face in any Morrison facility again. He pointed toward the exit like he was dismissing a server who'd spilled wine on a customer. David, call our IT contractors tomorrow morning. Get them in there to fix whatever Harold's done to our systems. I stood up slowly, adjusted my sleeve cuffs one last time, and picked up my phone. The Morrison Industrial Monitoring app was still showing green across all boards. For now, Mr. Morrison, I said, I hope you understand what you just did. I protected my family's authority in our own company. No, sir. You just signed the death warrant for everything your father and you spent 40 years building. Catherine was practically glowing with satisfaction. Don't be so dramatic. Companies fire problematic employees every day. I looked at her, this MBA princess who thought business was about power plays and hierarchy charts, and realized she was about to learn why submarine nuclear engineers take security protocols seriously. Miss Morrison, when you fire the person who designed your critical infrastructure without proper transition procedures, you're not just removing an employee. You're removing the keystone from your entire operational arch. I walked away without another word. Behind me, I could hear Catherine telling anyone who'd listen about putting employees in their place and how the company would run better without dead weight holding back progress. What happened next was like watching a controlled demolition in slow motion. Monday morning brought the first warning signs. Though they weren't dramatic enough to panic anyone, a few quality control sensors started running extended diagnostic cycles. Some production line timing seemed slightly off. David called their backup IT contractors, expensive consultants from Cleveland who specialized in industrial systems. Probably just routine recalibration, the lead consultant told David after spending 6 hours poking around the main control systems. We've established temporary bridges for the critical processes. Everything should stabilize within 48 hours. Catherine was triumphant. That evening, at dinner with potential investors, she made sure everyone heard about how the company had streamlined operations by removing toxic personnel who thought they were irreplaceable. Tuesday brought reality. The production lines didn't stabilize. They got worse. Robotic assembly units started rejecting components that had passed quality control for years. The supply chain integration platform began showing authentication errors for routine orders. Customer service started fielding confused calls from buyers who couldn't access their usual ordering interfaces. By Wednesday, things got serious. The main assembly line stopped mid-cycle, not crashed, just stopped, waiting for authentication codes that weren't coming. 20 years of production optimization, custom programming for specific client requirements, predictive maintenance schedules, all of it locked behind security protocols that required my biometric confirmation every 72 hours. David called another emergency meeting. This time, he brought in 3 different engineering firms. cybersecurity specialists, even some former Morrison employees who'd worked with the old systems. They spent 48 hours trying to bypass what they kept calling Brennan's locks. Here's the thing about military-grade security protocols. They're not designed to be bypassed by people who don't understand them. Every attempt to force entry just triggered deeper lockdown procedures. The system was protecting itself exactly as designed. By Friday, Morrison Industrial was hemorrhaging money faster than a submarine with hull breaches. $50 million worth of delivery contracts were in jeopardy. Ford and GM were making noises about contract terminations. The bank was asking uncomfortable questions about operational compliance failures. That's when David swallowed his pride and called me. "Hal," he said, and I could hear the desperation. "We need to talk." "I'm listening, David. Look what happened at the foundation dinner." That was family politics, not business sense. Can we work something out? I was sitting in my home office watching the Morrison Industrial stock price crater in real time. "What did you have in mind? Come back as a consultant. Name your price. Help us get the systems back online, and we'll figure out a transition plan that works for everyone." Before I could answer, Catherine grabbed the phone. Same entitled voice, same attitude, like the last week hadn't happened. "Listen here, you pathetic little man. I don't know what kind of computer virus you planted in our systems, but you're going to fix it right now, or we'll sue you for sabotage and industrial espionage. Then you're going to apologize for holding my family's company hostage, and maybe we'll consider not pressing criminal charges." I hung up. The next morning, Morrison Industrial Holdings filed for emergency bankruptcy protection. Turns out, when your entire production capacity goes offline indefinitely and you can't fulfill existing contracts, banks get nervous about loan payments. Customers don't wait around for you to figure out your own systems. Employees start looking for jobs at companies that can actually pay them. But here's where the story gets interesting, and why I'm telling it to you. While Morrison Industrial was collapsing, I'd been planning my next move. Not because I wanted to destroy the company, but because Navy training teaches you to always have contingency plans. During those 17 years with Morrison, I hadn't just been building their systems, I'd been learning their entire industry from the inside out. 3 months after Robert Morrison fired me, I opened Brennan Industrial Solutions in a rented warehouse 15 minutes from the old Morrison plant. Small operation at first, just me and 2 former Morrison engineers who'd been laid off when the company folded. Our first contract was with a German automotive parts manufacturer that needed help modernizing their Ohio facility. They'd been planning to work with Morrison Industrial before the bankruptcy. Instead, they hired us to design their entire automation infrastructure from scratch. 6 months later, we had 12 employees and contracts across 3 states. Within a year, we were doing $25 million in annual revenue, with profit margins Morrison never achieved. We'd hired back 400 former Morrison workers and were planning a second facility in Michigan, the Morrison plant, auctioned off for $20 million, about 1/10 of what it was worth as an operating facility. I bought it through a subsidiary company. Same building, same equipment, but now it runs on systems designed with proper security transitions and backup protocols. Catherine Morrison? Last I heard, she was facing SEC investigations over family foundation mismanagement. Turns out MBA credentials don't protect you when federal auditors start asking hard questions about fiscal responsibility. Robert Morrison moved to Florida, liquidating what remained of the family assets to cover legal bills. David started his own consulting firm and actually reached out to me about potential partnerships. He learned some valuable lessons about the difference between inherited authority and earned respect. Good man, just caught between family loyalty and business reality. As for me, I'm sitting in an office overlooking the same production floor I used to manage for the Morrisons. Same view, same machinery, but everything's different now. The workers here know their expertise is valued. The systems are designed with proper redundancies and transition procedures. And nobody gets fired for explaining technical realities to people with business degrees. The lesson here isn't about revenge or corporate karma. It's about understanding that in manufacturing, hell, in any technical field, competence isn't negotiable. You can't MBA your way around engineering reality. You can't fire the foundation of your operation and expect the building to keep standing. Robert Morrison learned that lesson the hard way. Catherine learned it even harder. But the real tragedy is that 2,100 good people lost their jobs because 2 family members confused authority with expertise. These days, when young executives ask me about industrial automation, I tell them something my old Navy chief used to say: respect the people who know how things actually work, because when systems fail, degrees don't fix them, experience does. Some people called what happened to Morrison industrial justice. Others called it a cautionary tale about employee relations. I call it basic engineering. Every system has critical failure points, and the most dangerous ones are usually human. That's a $500 million lesson, and it's one every business leader should understand. Because at the end of the day, you can't slap the person who keeps your world running and expect that world to stay intact.